Today, I want to talk to you about a subject that's, I think, of extreme importance in Tai Chi Chuan, and that is the curriculum of the Yang style. Now, I've never studied anything really but the Yang style. There's three styles, I suppose, that are actually taught in America these days: the Chen style, the Wu style, and the Yang style. Of historical importance is also the Sun style and also a few others that have sort of been offshoots. But those are the main kind of branches. And I'll tell you right in the very beginning, I've never really studied anything but the Yang style. But I had two teachers that were direct students of Yang, Jiang Menqing, who was my first teacher, and Zhu Chu Feng, who was the person who actually learned all of the most advanced techniques. And I also studied with two technical big brothers. They were also students of Jiang Menqing, but for me, they were both teachers. And that's William Chin and Ben Lo. So I have a lot of experience in this particular style, and I think I understand it very well. And if I have any kind of complaint about what I see in other styles, it's that I don't see a clear curriculum. Maybe it's there, and I just haven't been deeply enough into them to quite understand it. But the Yang style curriculum is extremely clear. It consists of 5 major elements: the solo form, Tui Shou, 3-step Tui Shou, which includes circular Tui Shou and a couple of small variations, Dalu, and Sanshou. Those 5 things comprise the entire curriculum of the Yang style. Now, the curriculum is a little hard to comprehend when you just see it in any part of it, because one of the features of Tai Chi Chuan is that, unlike almost every other martial art, its practices, and especially its beginning practices, are not simply rehearsals of what you do when you're fighting, of which you get better and better at, stronger, faster, whatever. But they are, let's say, they are situations in which the greatest number of variables possible has been removed, so that you can focus on one particular aspect of your fundamental training. And the exercise that focuses on that aspect may be extremely unrealistic in terms of, doesn't look like somebody fighting. Tai Chi Chuan actually is a method by which you learn a sort of more sophisticated method. The most sophisticated method anyone can use to fight, to learn to fight, is by fighting. Everybody sort of knows that, but it has to have a lot of caveats. First of all, you have to be fighting people that are very sophisticated themselves. Secondly, you have to be able to do it without killing each other right away. There's a whole lot of problems to learning to fight just by fighting, and that's sort of what martial arts are all about. All of them are rules. They're restrictions. They're things that saying we're going to obey certain rules. We're going to agree that we're all going to follow these rules. And by doing this, we're going to learn something very important about fighting. Now, it may, like with many martial arts, may look just like fighting, in which they've made rules like, well, we're not going to gouge each other's eyes out or bite each other's on the ears or anything, like this. Depends on the martial art. Some of them say no kicking. Some of them say just kicking. I saw one the other day where apparently you could hit people as hard as you wanted in the body, but you were not allowed to hit them in the head. So they had these strange contests where people just pounded on each other with padding, and I don't know. It doesn't lend itself to actual realism. So in other words, in a way, the harder a martial art tries to be realistic, the less realistic it becomes. Tai Chi Chuan says, okay, we're not going to fall into that trap. We're not going to just pretend we can have no rules, or we can have a very realistic situation. No, we're not good enough to do that yet. We're going to go through a long process by which we install certain fundamentals that are really fundamental to sophisticated boxing. They're going to say we have a target of a certain kind of sophistication, and we're going to figure out what causes that. And the ultimate product of that is that we will produce the most realistic training of all, in the sense that we'll produce a method of by having this method of training, we will produce people who can be extremely creative and extremely sophisticated with each other in their contact, and then beyond that, they can be just as free as they want. And not only that, but free to express a huge amount of power, free to not obey any sort of rules about. Of course, they're not going to gouge each other's eyes out, but free to obey, to just be completely creative and, spontaneous in their encounters with each other, and yet find themselves doing sophisticated things. Now, this refers to the original name of Tai Chi Chuan, which was long boxing. Long boxing is a bad translation. It means continuous boxing. It means, can two people get together and box continuously for any amount of time that they want without bringing things to conclusions, without, hurting each other and so forth? In other words, can they practice change instead of conclusion? Can they say, oh, I'll just assume that this other person is extremely good, and whatever he does, I'll just let him do it. If he counters my move, I'll let him counter. Whatever he does, I'll just change into something else that's more, suitable. I think every boxer would agree that this is a very sophisticated way to behave. But it takes more than just deciding you're going to behave that way. And you might say what it takes is very deep fundamentals. And you might say that Tai Chi Chuan is the martial art that is the training to do this extremely realistic kind of encountering, which it's just called Sancho, free Sancho. And free Sancho just means what I just said. It just means there are no particular rules. If you have any particular style, and they say we're going to practice Sancho, then maybe they have an understanding with each other that there are certain rules. But the word Sancho just means two guys duking it out, essentially. Now, there is a Sancho exercise in Tai Chi Chuan, but we'll get to that in a minute. The course of Tai Chi Chuan training is very important in the sense that it has to progress in a way that takes you to an eventual goal. So let's start off by saying what are let's say the two most important things in boxing. I think every boxer will realize and agree footwork is the magical thing about boxing, and footwork and timing is the way it's always said, because the steps that you take as a boxer are not particularly difficult or weird. They're just steps, but you have to take them at the right time. So there's no such thing as a right step not at the right time. So footwork and timing are said together always. And it's always been considered that these two things are kind of almost like magic, like sort of natural talent. You see people who just sort of have this. I mean, different teachers have maybe different tricks to help develop it or something, but it's not a huge curriculum aimed at this. And that's what Tai Chi Chuan is. Tai Chi Chuan is actually a curriculum aimed at the two most important factors in boxing. I could say the first one I think is footwork and timing. But if you ask a boxer, he'll say, well, yes, it is. That's the greatest because that's how, that's where the art is. But they'll say, but actually, of course, you also need to be able to hurt the guy. You need to have some sort of power. And there's always been a kind of, I don't know, I think it's kind of a sad connection. But the idea has always been you have guys who are boxers and you have guys who are punchers. And that's why someone will call himself, I'm a boxer puncher, meaning don't confine me to, I'm good at everything. And in fact, that's the ideal of boxing, is to be a boxer puncher in the most, sophisticated sense. Someone who has excellent footwork and timing, and when he has all that advantage of position and timing, he actually has a method of, doing some damage. So, in Tai Chi Chuan, we call this jing. And jing is a thing that actually is recognized by almost all fighters, even Western boxing. They might call it like snapping punches or, some other, turning over your punch is a frequent statement that if you turn the punch like this becomes a a kind of better thing than just hitting somebody straight. So the whole method of Chansi Jing in Tai Chi Chuan is a method of developing this kind of turning and winding to a very sophisticated degree. So what I'm trying to say is that it's a disservice to Tai Chi Chuan to assume that it is trying to produce some kind of magical, almost mythical quality by which you don't really have to know anything that regular boxers know about. You don't have to really do anything because you're going to have this power. Maybe it is jing, fudging. Oh, I'll just fudging the guy and that'll fix it. Well, fudging the guy won't help unless you have the right footwork and timing to be in the right place to hurt him when you fudging, because fudging expresses power over a distance of about this much. And it can't express it any over a larger distance, or you're not really doing fudging. That's just the way it works. Now, Tai Chi Chuan, like I say, has 5 techniques. First one is form, and that is openly, completely unrealistic, to the point that people make jokes about it. They say, why do you rehearse going very slowly when you're going to have to fight going very fast? Well, there are a whole lot of reasons for that, which I could go into, at any given time. And that's what I do for a living. But just consider the fact that you're going to see a lot of things in Tai Chi which are not attempts at realism. They are creating extremely variable-less situations. Situations in which you can really focus on things. When you do the form, you have to focus on things that you have to go very slowly to do. You're not going slowly just as some kind of fetish. It's because you need to go that slow to concentrate on all the things you need to concentrate on. There are also other reasons. But the point is, this is a basic thing that instills rules of posture, and some of those rules of posture are quite subtle. They're not just, static positions like plucking up the back or even relax. Well, anyway, there are complex movements of muscles internally sometimes that produce postural changes that are not really obvious, but they're there. So anyway, there's a lot of things to do when you do the form. It's extremely important. The next thing in the curriculum is Tui Shou. Now, Tui Shou is probably the most abused exercise because, as far as I've been able to see, in most schools, that is as far as everything goes. And if all you have is fixed step hand pushing, it sort of leads you to one of 2 conclusions. One is that you don't really ever need to take steps. That you're practicing fixed step because you're going to get really good at that. And nobody can make you move your feet. And if they try, you're just going to knock them down. The only other conclusion possible is that you're not really learning how to fight at all. And it's completely, some other kind of purpose to this exercise. Now, in fact, it sounds kind of strange and paradoxical, but it's true. The whole point of practicing a fixed step is to learn how to take steps. And the secret of this is found in the classic that says that force is released through the back and the steps follow the changes of the body. The point is you have to have the changes of the body first before you have the steps. So you want a situation in which taking the steps is a variable that you've removed. And now what you're practicing is just the changes of the body. You can isolate that, you can concentrate on it, you can do a whole bunch of things posturally and practice. So all the things you've practiced in the form, you can now practice in an active situation, not breaking your back and not twisting and not doing all kinds of things that are posturally incorrect. So you inculcate all these postural changes, you make a beautiful connection between the upper and lower bodies, and you instill a certain sort of game that you play with the other person, which gives you very complex orders about how to move the body. Once you have created this, then you have, after you've practiced this for a sufficient amount of time, you discover that by just simply following the rules and letting what you've learned take over, now there are certain situations in which you can take steps, and the steps are always the right steps because they follow the changes of the body, and your practice has given you the correct changes of the body. The first step in this, you might say, is three-step hand pushing. And three-step hand pushing is designed to teach you to take steps in response to aggression by the opponent in terms of space. I won't go into the details of this, but that's one kind of aggression. The person simply comes at you and takes over your space. And at the same time, you're doing some kind of boxing. Now, with Dalu, you go further to the point where you're not only dealing with space, but you're also dealing with deliberate techniques of the opponent, which create steps. And those become more complex. You raise that to quite a high level in Dalu. And then finally, you graduate to the Sancho exercise, in which the lessons of Dalu are expanded to a huge degree. And you sort of learn the currency of the game that you eventually play, which is all these boxing techniques, which are, like I say, they're sort of a currency. They're like coins or something. And you exchange them with the opponent. And by doing this, you finally arrive at the stage of continuous boxing. Now, I'd like to give a little more explanation to each one of these levels and each one of these phases, and maybe I will do that very soon. But for the moment, just understand, the point is the Yang style has a curriculum. The curriculum has a certain goal. The goal of that curriculum is not found in fixed step hand pushing. That is one of the processes. And the only goal you can get out of fixed step hand pushing, if you hate one, is just how to shove people. But understand it has a much more sophisticated goal than this, and that goal is not realized until you move into the higher levels of the curriculum. And this is what the Yang style is really all about.